Hello again, this is Dr. Home and the Reverend Leng Lim. Healing Conversations in Between Time, this is Pandamix. Thank you for joining us again. In that last episode, we introduced the theme of historical healing. And so we're going to continue that conversation. I'm going to pass to Leng to give us an overview where we're going with this.
So I think we were describing these dramas of trauma. Perpetrator, beneficiary, victim, and then bystander, beneficiary. In terms of what might happen in a family with an upstanding father who is also molested his children, and others bystanding and being victimized. And then talking about the United States, metaphorically, the United States as that perpetrator that has created this amazing Western civilization with its high achievements that has ridden on the back of slavery and genocide. And what to do, and what does healing now look like at this moment going forward? So I've been thinking about this, which is, what are the burdens each of these three different parties experience? So if you have experienced victimization, the hurdle is worthiness. How do you feel yourself worthy? Because when one has been violated, the sense is there's something wrong with me. It's just, even there was nothing wrong with you. You feel something is wrong with me. And we know that from people who have been raped, people who have been even in car accidents.
Just the trauma.
Just the trauma of it is this sense of something wrong with me. And you know this from your own experience of having grown up in a war in Vietnam and being a refugee. We know what this feels like to be gay. But in some ways, as difficult as it is, I think, if you acknowledge your victimization and that your question is worth and worthiness, you know the work cut out for you to do. And we see that in the African American community, that some people are saying, I don't need any help. I can do it on my own. Okay, good. This is the way that this group is doing self-worth. And others are saying, no, of course I don't want to be a victim, but I am experiencing the after effects of this, and I want to tell my story. And why is telling story important? Because it helps the healing when someone validates your story. So I don't think they're into victimology. It's a very natural process of being mirrored. And if they need a helping hand, then great. So I think that part, as weird it may seem, I hope I offend nobody, but we know where they're heading. It's the recovery of worth and worthiness, and they'll do it in different ways. And we have done it in different ways. I think the part that we've been talking about is what do you do, what is the hurdle for the bystander, and what is the hurdle for the perpetrator? And I think the hurdle for the bystander, who's also been a beneficiary, is to understand is the recovery of integrity. Now that you know, or now that you had heard this secret but never dealt with it, now that you know you're living your life off loot, you cannot, the innocence is gone, and you cannot blame someone, say, why did you tell me this and destroy my dream? Come on, be an adult, we all have to. Now it's like, okay, integrity. How do I have integrity? The Susan, the Peter, Asian Americans, white Americans. How do we recover our sense of integrity? Then I think the perpetrator, what is really hard, what is at work there in the midst of the denial and the anger and the shame and the guilt and the denial, and I think it's the recovery of humanity. It's the recovery of humanity, recovery of the human heart. To be human, to know the tenderness, the lovability, the forgiveness, the power of being a human.
Please take a breath with me. So I want to bring this back to the last episode when we mentioned the example of Susan, who is the daughter who were quite innocent and think of her dad is perfect. Peter is the middle child who benefit from that family system by keeping silent, go along. And then Christina.
Go along, hope it passes away.
Christina was someone who really were victimized, traumatized, and harmed, and continue to be so as long as the family system denying her experience.
Yes, and I want to add a change. Victimized, yes. Traumatized, yes. But not the only one traumatized. I think that's important to
I think
say.
The whole system is
traumatized. And the bystanders are traumatized from their repression. What is the trauma for the perpetrator? What's the trauma for dad, who's been upstanding and providing, and also alcoholic, addicted, and has done this terrible deed and crime? There is trauma, and we can say, okay, he might have inherited this trauma, and we know in families there's been trauma passed on to lead to this kind of behavior.
So there's a history in that family
there's a history of unprocessed, yes. And I think one of the reasons why you're bringing this up is so that we are not going to be passing this on as a society to the next generation. So Riesma Menachem has already said that the early white British settlers who came were traumatized in the white Middle Ages, and so they had been victims of violent crimes, and then political crimes, religious crimes, and then they came here and they're perpetrating it. I think the hardest, if you have been a perpetrator or you're a bystander and therefore also perpetrating, is horror, guilt, shame, and at the end of the day, can I be forgiven? Am I worthy of forgiveness? Can I be released? Can I be a human?
I think forgiveness is available and possible only when the person who committed the sin or the crime asks for forgiveness.
Yes.
As long as the crime and the sin is still being denied, still in denial about that, forgiveness is not possible.
So what do you say if someone says, but the perpetrator is the slavehold owners? That's been 100 years ago already, so there are actually no longer any perpetrators.
Well, look at the system. Look at how Christina is being treated. Look at how the rest of the other siblings are being treated. And what kind of relationship they have together. If the family are not talking together, if they're not reaching out to heal and to connect and speak truth to each other, then it's a toxic system. And if it is a toxic system...
Yeah, but where's the perpetrator? There's no person anymore.
Well, I think, it could be daddy's dead.
Yeah.
Daddy's dead, but the family members still carry on this legacy of what daddy did.
Right. So what does perpetration look like then, with daddy dead? With the perpetrator dead, what does perpetration look like? So are you saying it looks like denial? Is a denial a form of perpetration?
Yeah, denial is like an ongoing perpetration. Yeah. So I wonder what kind of relationship the children of this family intended to have with each other, and how do they intend to carry on this family together. And I think this is where family system, particularly in the US, is so broken in so many ways. People's relationship with their family is quite tenuous.
As a result of these historical issues.
Yes.
And the question is, how do we want to be with each other? And I think this is what we have to face up to it. Some people will say, don't want to have any relationship, whether it's the Christinas and the victims, or whether it's the perpetrators and the beneficiaries or the bystanders. And that's where I'm deeply worried about where we are going in the United States, and perhaps in some sense in the world as well. Because if we stop caring and stop hoping for being one family, one humanity, one United States, then we're in deep trouble. And so I also wonder whether the question to be asked is not just how you and I, or black and white and Asian or Hispanic, want to be with each other. I know those are not the only categories. But how we want to be with ourselves. Because in each of us is a victim and a bystander and a perpetrator. And I think in each of us is the question of, as someone who's experienced victimization, how do I recover worth? And do I recover worth through more frenetic activity and waiting for others to praise me? Like President Trump. Or what do I do with the bystander in me? And how do I recover integrity? And then the perpetrator in me. I'm looking at that more and more, because even in myself, I look, I don't think I've perpetrated anything, but I can hold the idea that I have through silence, through denial. And I think, wow, that means really asking for forgiveness. And to ask for forgiveness from whom? And I think of moments in our relationship where we've asked each other for forgiveness, and actually how hard it is to actually ask for forgiveness. And at this moment, I'm thinking of, biblical stories. People may know that, Peter was a disciple of Jesus, and he was a bystander. He denied Jesus 3 times, betrayed. And yet, he found his way back into the community of other disciples through all his shame, and he met the resurrected Jesus. But Judas, another one of the disciples, the one who betrayed him for 30 pieces of silver, when he realized what wrong he had done, he tried to return the money. And when it was not accepted, he killed himself. And so I keep on thinking, wow, what was it going on with Judas, Judas Iscariot? Because Jesus was ready to forgive him. I think forgiveness is there all the time, or love is there all the time, or restoration is there all the time. At least that comes out of my Christian belief. Saint Teresa of Avila who was amazing saint and brought in front of the Spanish Inquisition, where the church was torturing her and asked her whether she believed in hell. And she said, yes, I do. And then under her breath, she said, and it's empty. Meaning there isn't a hell. God isn't out to punish us. I think the punishment comes when we cannot avail ourselves of forgiveness, of knowing it's there, of restitution, of making amends. When we cannot believe we can be courageous or have integrity, and then it's almost like we come to the pool of water to drink, and then no one is withholding it from us, we withhold it from ourselves. And I think we've certainly seen that of fathers who have actually raped for whatever reason, and seeking it instead of killing themselves. And they do. They kill themselves. They kill their own hearts by drinking, by continuing down the path of destruction towards others or towards self.
So what I'm hearing is that forgiveness is available. Forgiveness is possible. One has to be willing to remember.
Yeah, to remember, to retrieve.
To retrieve, to recover, to admit. To own up.
To own up. And then to humbly say, I wish to be released, will you release me? Because that release is left to the other one to release.
And that's very, very scary to do, and it takes so much courage to be able to do that, to ask for forgiveness. Because I don't know of anything harder in life than the act of admitting to one's own failures and sins, and then to ask for forgiveness. Especially when it's in human relationship with each other. And so I love what you're saying, that, back to the family history, family story with Christina. Christina needs to learn how to recover her own worth.
Yes.
And so that has to do with her own seeking of compassion and forgiveness with herself.
Yeah, if that's one
young,
part of her work.
She didn't know how to protect herself, and this happened to her, and so there's healing for her.
Yes.
For Christina. Then there's, you're saying, the bystander, the Peter in the family, the one who knows but didn't speak up.
Or didn't prevent, or couldn't prevent, or
and
benefit
so
from it,
there.
or whatever. But now that you're older, now that you're not a child, now that you can in fact speak up, now that when you can in fact do something, now when you in fact know.
So part of the speaking up is actually speaking up by acknowledging the truth of what happened. And then the willingness to speak up also on behalf of Christina.
And to share, right? I think if we're talking about, if the loot from Dad had been unequally shared, what's also going to be hard for Peter as a bystander, for those of us who are beneficiaries, to think about really sharing, because our own prideful image is that we made all the wealth ourselves in the US by our own efforts. But in fact, no one ever does that with any kind of wealth. It always comes from having benefited from an inheritance. And how do we then share? But the perpetrator one of opening up to love, because there is, there is this other teaching. It's not in a Bible, but it's in a tradition about Satan, who was Lucifer, the angel, the brightest of all the angels, who rebelled against God and was cast into the outer darkness. And why does God's love not reach Lucifer? Because of hardness of heart. Sometimes been called pride, but I've been wrestling with it. Because God is eminently open to all sorts of forgiveness. What's required. So it's like let yourself be loved. At least from the Christian gospel, let yourself be loved. I keep on thinking of Judas Iscariot, who could not believe that having murdered God, which is Christ, that God would love him back. There's this other story of St. Paul, who was then called Saul, who had been persecuting the Christians and murdered Stephen, the early martyr of the church. And then he's on a horse going to Damascus, and there's this bright light that strikes him. He falls off the horse and he hears the voice, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he takes that to be Christ speaking to him. And he spends, I think, 40 days, which is supposed to be this completion of time, wrestling with this under the guidance of, I can't remember, Ananias or someone. And then his heart turns around. So, the Christian process is confession, and confession has 4 steps to it. You recognize, you repent, which means you turn around, you say no more. You offer restitution. You say, what can I do? I cannot restore everything, because the past is the past, but restitution. And then the other offers you something, may offer you forgiveness, may not, but then you are restored. And you say forgiveness is hard, but we were in South Africa in February visiting Mpho and spending time, a lovely lunch with Archbishop Tutu, and thinking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that South Africa went through. And what we learned was black South Africans were ready to forgive, but a small number would actually only go forth to confess what they had done and to receive the forgiveness. And I think this is just the human condition, and I think we are being asked now collectively to say, actually, and from our conversation as not black, not white persons, I have never heard one black person in the United States, people who have also been not just discriminated, but have been violated, to ever sort of say what we want is retribution. I have just not heard retribution. But what is secretly held in the minds of people who are identified with being white is that there's going to be a retribution. But what I sense is, if the steps are made for restoration, there will be restoration. But the repentance, the recognition, the restitution must be genuine. One last story, right? So, I have 2 friends, one white with some native blood and one Asian. And they got together and found themselves in kind of this trance state, shamanic journey, and started talking about race. And one asked the other for forgiveness. They had never been in conflict, but they were asking on behalf of ancestors. The white person went down on his knees and asked. And the other heard. They had an intense conversation, but there was a blessing and a restoration that took place. I think that's what's happening in the human soul.
Please take a breath with us. Forgiveness is possible and available.
Restoration, resurrection.
I guess my wondering now is how do we cultivate that kind of willingness, that kind of vulnerability, and the willingness to be in relationship with each other.
And
So
hope, and hope. I want to say to those who feel themselves somehow accused of being perpetrators, hope that you can be ready and willing.
Yeah, you introduced this word hope, which is, I don't quite know what to make of it at this moment. For me, it's more than just hope. To me, it's courage and willingness.
For me, it's always faith, hope, love.
So thank you for listening to us. We still don't know. We figure out as we go along here. So our invitation for you is to ask us more questions and engage in conversation with us. Thank you for listening and watching. We're looking forward to see you in the next episode. Please take one more breath with us.
And thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for being with us.